Hi guys. I hope you're good. Hi Sharon, how are you? I hope everybody's good and keeping well and staying safe. Tonight I'm going to be joined by Geeta. Many of you know Geeta from Dadimas and also from her writing page, Educating Geeta. And the reason that I've invited Geeta on is because she's not a relationship expert, but there is something very special about her. She's just got this wonderful way, and I know many of you can relate that have had a conversation with Geeta. She's just got so much wisdom, and she's always so willing to sort of share that wisdom. And given she's been married for 31 years, I thought she'd be a really great person to come and share, you know, her pearls of wisdom with the rest of us. I get messages all the time from women, you know, that might be struggling, that might be going through a bit of a turbulent time, that might be struggling with in-laws and things like that. And some of these topics we're going to talk about in the Baby Brain Tea and Talk Lounge, which is the group that I've launched this week. And it's just, you know, we appreciate that you can't always talk so openly about certain topics. But Geeta and I are just going to be discussing a very broad kind of range of points that she would recommend with sustaining a healthy marriage and healthy relationships. So I'm just going to invite Geeta in. Hi Geeta, how are you?
Hi, I'm good, thank you.
How's everything going?
It's good. It's good. I've actually got some lipstick on and
Oh,
eyeliner.
you always look amazing, honestly. You always look
No,
beautiful.
just for you, Harps.
Aw. Um, so I've just done a brief introduction, Geeta. I'm so grateful to have you. And I know that, you know, you want to reiterate that you're not a marriage expert, you're not a relationship coach or anything like that. Geeta is just a beautiful wife, a mother, a scholar, and she's just, as I said, she's just got this beautiful energy about her, and so many of us, especially of my generation, really look up to her. She's just got this wonderful way. Um, so yeah, Geeta, do you want to give a little bit of an introduction as to? I know you don't normally, you don't do Instagram lives very frequently. So what made you agree to doing this one?
Because I like you. Number one, I don't do Instagram lives because I think at the moment in particular, since COVID, I think the market, well, the social media market has been flooded with Instagram lives. And I don't really want to say something on a topic that I'm not an expert in usually. And I think some of us have become experts at everything. So, but I agreed to this because I do get messaged quite a lot about relationships or get asked for advice about relationships. And I suppose I've kind of done just over 30 years now. So I've got that life experience.
Yeah.
But I've got that life experience through a South Asian lens, and the lens of having an introduced marriage, living in the extended family, and some of the difficulties that I know South Asian women in particular face. So yeah, my marriage is far from perfect. I'm not a relationship expert, but hopefully I can shed some light on the principles that have helped to guide us, really.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. So I know, you know, you say you're not a relationship expert, but in your own kind of marriage and relationships, you've become, you know, we're all kind of experts in our own marriages. When I say experts, I mean we know our marriages are best. So what would you say, what would you say are kind of the fundamentals of marriage? What is the most kind of basic foundation of a good, healthy marriage?
Well, it's a difficult one because when I got married at 19, I don't think I really knew. And I just almost tripped into marriage and I learnt as I went along. So my skill set in marriage and relationships was kind of like, you know, find out as you go along. But if I had to really pinpoint it to something, and it relates to the pictures that I sent to you, Harps, when you said, oh, have you got a picture of yourself? And I don't actually have many pictures just of me. on my own because I don't like them. But I sent you a picture of me holding a children's book which said kindness on it. And I think, you know, there's so much in social media and different platforms about kindness. But I think we often forget, you know, we can share stories about kindness with our children, but we forget about speaking, acting and being in a relationship from a place of kindness and love. And it sounds really simple, but kindness goes a long way in a relationship, whether it's through your language, whether it's through your actions, whether it's just through how you respond in your body language. So I think kindness has to be number one.
No, I agree. And I think it's quite easy to, you know, when that disappears, the situations can escalate, or, you know, you can quite easily make the other person feel unappreciated, or, you know, it is a basic fundamental. It's something like I've even learned with the children, you know, when I'm gentle and soft and kind, even if I'm cross with them or they're frustrated me, I'm much likely to get a positive kind of reaction from them than if I'm, you know, angry or annoyed or kind of behaving in an unkind way. So I definitely agree with that. I think that's something that I've learned as well, to just, you know, speak with a soft tongue and come from a place of love, come from a place of kindness.
Yeah, and that harps, it kind of, I wouldn't say, you know, that I'm always kind and I'm always softly spoken or calm, because I'm not, and it comes with time. But it was only the last couple of weeks when I was journaling, actually, and I reflected back to when I first got married and I lived in the extended family with my in-laws. And, you know, my mother-in-law and I have different life values and philosophies in a lot of areas. But I've learned a lot from the older women who have interacted with me, even if they've led their marriages in different ways. And one of the things that I have learned definitely from my mother-in-law is about a kind tongue and thinking before you speak. And I know these sound like really basic things, but I think sometimes in anger, you can say something which is quite curt or it comes out wrong. And I think sometimes we need to learn to pause and think before we speak, and how the receiver, i.e. our partner, is going to receive that.
It's so true. It's such. I've got a bit of a short temper, so I'm quite, you know, I don't really pause before I speak, and that's not just with the boys in general. I can be quite, you know, and it's almost having that. It goes back to sort of the meditation side for me as well, just learning to pause and just take a breath before you react.
Yeah.
I think, you know,
and I think the language as well that we use, Harps, the language of the relationship. And I know I've spoken before about this with you, you know, there's so many relationship books and guides and gurus at the moment, you know, everywhere. Everyone's out to earn a quick buck in this kind of field in particular. But I think the language of the relationship should, I think, be very much grounded in the we-ness rather than you've done this, I've done this, because that sets up this kind of point scoring competitive nature rather than, you know, it's almost like this third dimension in the relationship. So there's I, there's you, and then there's the we. And the we is like that, we're talking about the relationship, the third entity, which is made up when the two of you come together.
It's so true. So, it's interesting because when we lived with our in-laws, it was very much working together, and it was, you know, a very protective and very nurturing. And then we moved out and it was like, hold on a second, now it's you and me. And it took time for us to realize, actually, we're on the same team, we're together, like, you know, we should be working together. And actually, one of the best pieces of advice my mother-in-law has always given me, which I'm so fortunate for, is she's always instilled it in us. She was talking about it just today, actually, that number one, the foundation is you and your partner. And then second is your children. And then third is, you know, the in-laws, your parents, your siblings. So she's very much instilled that in us. And I'm very fortunate because I do know that sometimes, you know, especially in South Asian families, the relationship with the in-laws isn't always straightforward. But even that, echoing what you said about kindness, I've always tried to approach that. Even before I got married, even before I knew who my in-laws were going to be, I always went in with that. They're my husband's parents, and you know, the same love I feel for my parents, my husband will feel for his, and it's not a competition. Like, that will be the mother of my, you know, my husband, and I'll be his wife. We've both got our own places. But I always kind of came from a place of, you know, we're both important in his life, and we're both important in each other's lives. So I think, again, even applying the concept of kindness even to the relationship with your in-laws is quite important. Even when you have differences, even when, you know, think the way you might do things is quite different, I think where possible, even trying to see that relationship through a kind lens can really help, and not always assuming that.
Absolutely, Hops, I agree. I mean, I lived in the extended family for 5 years, and I'm married to the oldest son of 3, and from quite a traditional in-laws family. And I think as my marriage has moved on, one of the things that I've definitely learned to do more is step inside the experiences of my in-laws through making an effort to learn about their past and their history, which has helped me to understand the place from which they live their life, their starting point. So if they make particular comments, it's not because they want to be cruel to me, it's because that's part of their experience. That's the part they're speaking from. If they gave me postnatal advice on something, which I might think, oh gosh, this sounds a bit archaic. Well, actually, they've been raised to know that's part of their ancestral wisdom that has helped them. It's what their mothers, grandmothers have taught them. And I think also it's if you show respect for your husband's family and he shows respect for your family, you're actually showing respect for you as an individual as well. So if I'm, you know, if I make an effort to phone my husband's mum and say, oh gosh, your mum hasn't been very well recently, which she hasn't been, you know, I'm checking in with her daily. But it doesn't mean if my mum wasn't well, he wouldn't do the same. And sometimes, you know, earlier on in our marriage, I did have to kind of remind him about that and say, you know, just because, you know, traditionally it was the wife's role to phone up or to check in on the mother-in-law, it doesn't mean that it doesn't work both ways. But that all takes time, Hops, as you know. And every relationship is unique. Every set of circumstances are unique. You know, in our relationship, you know, what we've got and what we've been through is unique to us. What you and Preetham have gone through with the nature of your children and particular circumstances you have, I can't compare my relationship to yours. And this comparison culture, we've got to really be careful of it. And I really think that social, I mean, I'm going to be quite bold here, actually, from my perspective, but it doesn't necessarily mean that everyone's going to agree with it. We choose not to share our relationship on social media. And my husband has a particular view on this, which I absolutely respect. I think your relationship is sacred when you take those vows in the eyes of God. It is very private to you. And in all honesty, do I want to know how many years? Yes, you know how many years I've been married because it sets the context for this talk. But if I put up 50 pictures of us 2 kissing and hugging each other and all of that, that's great if it's part of your profile. But what you know, what benefit is there to that? Why do I want to showcase such a special and precious relationship that I've got with the world? Are they really interested? So I think we need to be looking inwards at our relationships and together, rather than looking at how we're showcasing the show reel of our relationships as well. Because I've seen and heard from a lot of women who've contacted me over the last couple of years about, oh, is it just me? You know, my relationship isn't like that. Such and such's relationship is that. And it's human nature. We compare.
It's human, and this is the thing with social media in general, isn't it? It's not just relationships, it's everything. That whole comparison, even sharing, you know, there's a fine line with even sharing the family stuff. So for me, you know, there's a lot of things that don't make it to social media because to be quite frank, I just don't want to. I don't really share my relationship on there much. I share the boys, obviously, not so much Arjun anymore, but Sarjan. But even with that, fine line, you know, where is the cutoff? And I think we spoke about this the other day, didn't we, Geeta, where there's the reality and then this sort of this kind of, you know, imaginary world, and then somewhere in between there's a social media has blurred all these kind of boundaries and what we would normally share and what we wouldn't normally share. It's kind of just, it's blurred boundaries, and you know, seeking permission of your partner before you post a picture of them, simple things like that, or whether, you know, if you're going to share something about them, getting their approval. I think, you know, if there was no social media, you'd absolutely double check those things, but with social media, it's blurred all these kind of lines of, you know, these boundaries. And it's quite interesting. So Breatham's not a social media person at all. I mean, he doesn't mind when I post the odd family picture or, you know, our wedding pictures.
Yeah.
But we don't really, that's our choice. That's something that we, you know, as a...
Yeah, and it is. I mean, my personal view is, I think when you enter your relationship and you take your vows, generally they're done in the eyes of God, or in a church or wherever it is. You take those vows are sacred, whether or not you believe in God or not. And if something is sacred, why are you sharing it with the whole world? Unless you're sharing, and that's the only reason, because you and I had a chat about today. Otherwise, I don't normally say yes to lives. The only reason I said yes is because we're going to be sharing generally some key principles, which I think have helped us through nearly 31 years of marriage. And, you know, I spoke to Sabash before, so some of the points any points that I raised today, they're points that the two of us have discussed. And the other thing that I was just saying to actually my husband over dinner tonight, after we finished, you know, he's gone out, you know, somewhere tonight, but I said, could you see yourself growing older with me? And he said, well, I don't think anyone else is going to have me, are they? And so I think that's just a question. Maybe we need to pose it to ourselves more, that sometimes we can become quite complacent and we can moan and groan about things or about the other. But actually, could you see yourself growing older with anybody else? Or is this the person that you can see yourself growing older with, who's going to nourish and all of that stuff, you know, be there for you?
Yeah, and if so, and this is something that I always say to Breatham as well. I'm like, you know, the kids are here and we get so busy with, you know, the day-to-day and being with the children. I'm like, one day they're going to be, you know, they're going to grow and they're going to leave the nest, and it's just going to be us. So that's always there, you know, like we're going to be ultimately growing old together. And, you know, it's so important to nurture the relationship between husband and wife constantly as well, even though it's difficult. I appreciate, especially when you've got children. But it's one of those things, like, I know we spoke about you know, common interests and different interests. So with us,
yeah, we did. We talked about shared interests. So,
go on, Geeta.
Yeah, shared interests. Yeah, can you hear me? Yeah, I talked about shared interests, and Sabash and I have very different interests. He is extremely sporty to the point where it's quite intimidating at times, actually. He's, you know, he's a competitive cycler. He does deep sea swimming, all of that. I am absolutely petrified of going underwater. I hate cycling on the road. I hate sci-fi reading of books. But, you know, one of the things that I'm really interested in, and I have been, particularly over the last 5 years, is how can I make an effort, and vice versa, how can he make an effort to trip over into each other's interests? So it's pushing yourself out of your comfort zone. And for example, you know, I don't like cycling on the road, but I have been looking into bikes, because actually that's quality time that I'm missing out on us together. So my compromise is, well, I'm happy to go cycling and have a go, as long as we're not cycling on busy roads and we go to safer spaces for me. I won't go deep sea diving because it absolutely petrifies me at this stage. But, you know, even our interest in politics sometimes differs, but it's making an effort to understand, where does his politics come from, you know, and all of that as well, so that we can actually have conversations outside of, what are we making for dinner tonight? Have you taken the bin bags out? Have you sorted the paperwork out this week? Finding space to have those conversations that maybe that you have with friends as well, is how can we do to nourish our relationship?
And I can relate to you. So just like your husband, Breatham is an adrenaline junkie. You know, he's got a super bike. He's, you know, into roller coasters and going on jet skis on holiday. And I'm just not like that. And, you know, just like you, so with the cycling thing, I'm like, okay, when Sergeant was born, I think it ignited this thing in me where it's like, life's so short, you know, if you can't stop him from riding his bike, get on it with him. So
get on the bike.
yeah, I literally, I'm not going to lie, it's bloody terrifying, but it is really nice to be able to, I see the fire in him when he rides his motorbike. He's so excited. He's like a little kid, just so, you know, he's so excited. And I think I want to be part of that. You know, I'm missing out because of my own fear. So I kind of join him on things like that. But with like jet skiing and stuff like that, I'm really scared of open water, and you know, I don't go under the water either. And so that's where my boundary comes in. I'm like, no, you know what, I'm willing to try this, but I don't actually feel comfortable doing this, and I need you to respect that. I need you to understand that I really don't want to do it, and I really appreciate that you want me to and that you want to do this with me, but this isn't for me. And vice versa, you know, he knows that I love going to the cinema, or I love trying new food and stuff like that, so he'll say, come, let's go, you know, let's go and do something different. And I agree with you. I think if two people are too similar, that would actually be quite boring as well, because there's no new dimension. So in the beginning, I always used to think, oh my gosh, you know, this is, what have we got in common in interest? But it's actually kept our relationship alive, having different interests. And
absolutely, Harps, you're right. And you spark each other through your differences, but also it comes back to the point you said. It's like when I see him, you know, biking or cycling or getting ready to go out for a cycling for a couple of hours, he's so happy and excited. And I know even if I took part weekly for half an hour in that just shows that, you know, I've taken an interest. But, you know, I enjoy, for example, writing, or I enjoy philosophy debates and things like that. But, you know, if he takes an interest in that, or something I'm reading, that means a lot to me. It's like, oh my gosh, we can have a conversation about this.
Yeah. It's totally true. And I think also, you know, sometimes you can get lost in, oh, we're quite different and, you know, we don't have common interests. But sometimes just remembering the fundamental kind of commonalities in your relationship. So I keep a regular kind of diary on this to check myself in every so often. So things like, we're both early risers. Even before we had children, we were always both up by 7 in the morning. We've always been that way. I don't know why. Compared to our siblings who wake up at 10, 11 if they're given the chance, we were never like that. You know, we both have the same approach to finances. Our idea of a nice evening is being at home watching a movie, you know, maybe with a takeaway. You know, we're both very creative. So how I like sewing, he's very hands-on with, you know, making stuff and building and things like that. So I think really trying to find the commonalities as well, even though they're different, we're similar in so many simple ways as well, which has actually made our relationship so much more, I don't know what the right word is, but it means that we work together really, really well. We complement each other very well.
Yeah, and that's really important. I mean, I don't know how it worked for us because we had an introduced marriage, but it does seem to. And like you, he is the oldest son and he has a lot of responsibility in his family. I'm the oldest sibling in my family. And the two of us are quite similar in that we are both very structured people. We both get up very early in the morning. We work hard, so we're willing to put in the hours. And I think that comes down to values. So coming back to what I said at the start about one of the fundamentals is kindness. And one of the things I said to Annie when she got married, or, you know, the advice when she wasn't even dating, is fundamentally, it doesn't matter what the background is of the guy that you're dating or you're getting married to. If you don't have shared values, this is going to be difficult. You can have different interests, but your values need to be similar, i.e. the way you choose to bring up your children, your values and respect for your parents, your values and respect for hard work and money, how you respect money, you know, how you, your philosophy on food and wastage or sustain. You know, there's some fundamental marriages. You know, there's some absolute fundamental values that unite you. So, you know, for us too, the way in which we raise our children has been very similar. Our values in terms of grafting for money, saving money, building a future together, like you said, getting up early because we saw the early hours as the most important hours of the day. All of that is part of who we are, and it's how we've passed those values on to our children.
Yeah.
And you know Annie well. Annie is in a mixed heritage relationship. And when Annie got married, that's one of the things that she said, that Mum, fundamentally, the man that I've chosen shares the values, shares very similar values to what we've been brought up with.
Which is so important. I think, so with us, so with the whole children thing, so we're very similar, but we're also quite different. So in terms of, for example, you know, with the religion side, he's not that. He is obviously Sikh faith, but he's not as practical as I am with it. So, and I guess even with that, before I used to think, oh my gosh, the kids are not going to understand because, you know, one of us is more into it than the other. And then I thought, actually, no, it's fine, because that can be something that I can lead with, while he might lead other things. You know, you don't both have to be pouring everything into the same kind of, you know, areas of growth for even your children. You know, and I know he respects that and values that in me, that, oh, I'm so glad that you can kind of lead on that, you know. And I look at him and I think, gosh, I'm so glad you can kind of, you know, teach them the principle of managing money from a young age, you know, teaching them. He's always going on about, you know, little examples he will use in day-to-day life. And I think, oh gosh, you're so good and creative with thinking of how to explain those things to them. But
I think you're absolutely right there. And that's where the we-ness comes in, the unity, that you can't both, you know, have expertise in everything with your children. And I'm really glad that I've taken a leadership in certain areas and he's taken a leadership in certain areas. And it's what you do when you're in workplaces. If you think about it, it's common sense. You know, if you look at your workplace or where you work, there'll be people from all sorts of disciplines and skills. But when you pull those skill sets together, it's when you get success.
yeah.
So, you know, we can't be good at every single thing. I mean, maths, although I'm at maths, you know, maths definitely isn't my forte, whereas that's an area that I always pushed on to Subhash. Language, creative stuff is definitely my forte compared to him. So yeah, we have different things that we are. The other thing I wanted to raise, Harps, is I talked about looking towards the people who are older than me. So my sister-in-laws, my mother-in-law, other women that I look up to in marriages and relationships. But I think the other person who I think, you know, we often forget our own children as well. I know your children are young, and because I got married so young, at 19, you know, I had my children young. But when Annie got married nearly 2 years ago, next week now, actually, it's been, when Annie got married, it was very interesting for us looking and observing her and Dale going through a pre-marriage course that they had to do with the church. So they had to do like an 8-week series of sessions looking at values. And it was really interesting because Annie would often come home and bring the book. She got an extra spare book for us and said, Mum and Dad, you might want to work through this too, which was really interesting. So she very subtly left it next to our bed and said, oh, why don't you do these exercises as well? And that was really, really interesting, because what we were looking at of values, for example, how much time do we give to our respective families? How are we going to look at the finances as a relationship? So you look at different areas of your relationship, but you look at it before you get married. And I just honestly, I just wish we did that across other cultures as well. And it wasn't just part of the Catholic Church. I mean, that was part of something that Annie had to do because she wasn't Catholic. So she had to agree to doing that. And initially she was a little apprehensive, but once she started it and she looked into the content of the modules that they had to do, and they had to do homework every week, which was quite funny, seeing what they had to do. But, you know, I think there's some real substance in doing things like that, working through issues. Whereas when I got married and I had an introduced marriage, You know, my father was quite strict. I didn't really get to go on dates and stuff with my husband. You know, they're actually having to talk about some complicated issues before they get married.
I think that's such a good idea. That sounds brilliant. And actually stopping and
Well,
having these talks.
Nima's just said that as well.
Oh, you're breaking up, Geeta. You're just breaking up, Geeta. Guys, can you let me know if Geeta's
Can you
breaking
hear
up?
me?
You're kind of breaking up.
Yeah. So Nima's just said she also had to read the 5 languages of love, which Annie did as well.
I love
So
that book.
it was really interesting learning from my daughter as well, and actually being upskilled by her and her pre-marriage course materials.
I think that's so good though, to not sort of assume, oh, I know it all because I've done it, and being open to learning even through those younger. I think there's a gift in that, to always being open to learning. Because, you know, I think that's amazing. I wish we'd done something like that, because you don't often have, I think especially South Asians, we don't really stop and think, okay, what are our values? You know, we don't have these kind of, I don't know, these reflective kind of conversations about things like that. It's just, you just kind of get on with it. It's not a thing to talk about. But I've read the 5 languages of love as well, and I found it really, really interesting. And Preetham read it as well, actually. And then I think there's quizzes at the end, isn't it? And you've got to kind of each other. And it was really interesting what came up, and it helped us to understand, actually, you know, where I might be expecting something of you, that's not something you value. So you're going to be expressing your love through what you value. But just being mindful and understanding each other is such a massive thing. Because you can get lost in it day to day. So I'll say things to him like, oh, you know, we haven't been on date night in a while. And he'll be like, but I show you I love you by making you breakfast every morning. And it's like, oh yeah, you do that. It's so easy to forget, because my language of love is kind of, you know, that one-to-one time communication, you know, affection. I can't even remember what they exactly are, but his were acts of service. But it is really
that's
interesting.
Exactly the same as us at home. Yeah, and with Sabash, he'll say the same. He's not one of these guys who'll be gushing, lovey-dovey, hence why he doesn't like all this social media performativity, he calls it. He's not interested in any of that. He always says your actions speak louder than it's about your actions. So like you said, if he makes me a cup of tea, or he notices that I'm overwhelmed with workload or whatever, he bought me a cup of tea, or, you know, bought me a sandwich or something, that's actually showing that he cares. And if that's the way he shows love, you know, we don't all have to express love in the same ways. You know, that would make us robots. So Nima's just said premarital counselling should be a prerequisite for all marriages. I think it should be. And one of the things that Annie was saying to me over the weekend, actually, is that they've been married for 2 years next week, and that they're going to revisit it, because what you can do is, once you've done the pre-marriage course, you can go back and revisit it. And I wish we'd done that, really, something like that. But we did about two years ago, Harps. We decided to embark on marriage counselling, not because we're going to break up, or because, you know, either of us are thinking of leaving each other, but we felt like we needed a check-in on ourselves and our relationship, you know, and we wanted a third person, a neutral person, to actually talk us through some of the things that maybe we differ on, and how we can come back together again. And I can honestly say it was money worth spent at that time. I don't think we could have afforded it early on when we had other types of issues, but it was definitely worth it, having a neutral person to talk you through that.
I think it's interesting, because often in marriage, or in relationship, in any relationship, you can kind of get quite bogged down with your perspective and your point of view, that often it's hard to put yourself in the other person's shoes. So for example, with us, Preetham works incredibly hard. He's you know, the main breadwinner, and he's very much, you know, go. He's very driven in that respect. He's a provider. He wants to do the best for his family. He wants to, you know, give us this life. And I work as well, but his thing is, he's very practical as well. So he'll fix the cars, he'll, do the plumbing. He can do, he's like a bit of a jack of all trades. And with me, but he's got no interest in doing the Hoover or washing the dishes. Now, in some instances, that's a very traditional kind of setup where, it's kind of like, well, the woman can do the manage the house. He doesn't actually expect me to do it. He doesn't say that I need to do it, but he doesn't say that he'll do it either. So then to me, it's like, well, who else is going to do it? And he's like, yeah, but the cleaner comes. And I'm like, well, the cleaner hasn't been for 3-4 months now. But
yeah,
kind of, in the beginning, it was like,
but that's one of the areas. That's one of the areas, Harps, that you would look at, really, if you look at your household chores and what constitutes work. Because sometimes we often think that actually, if you are the homemaker or you're the person at home doing the stuff at home, actually earning money carries greater status. But actually, even running your home, it still constitutes work. So it's how do you... And I did an exercise about 1.5 years ago where I made a list of everything that is required to keep our house and family running. And that includes all the soft skills and the emotional labor that we, whether it's in our respective families, as carers for our parents or our siblings, all those other roles that you play, and making a list of those and actually being transparent about it and saying, actually, look at, oh God, it's really interesting how much you're doing. And actually, I don't want to do some of these things. So I'm really glad that you've taken them on. But actually, it took a writing exercise to actually realize this is all the stuff that we're doing without talking to each other or recognizing it.
Yeah, and I think it's that whole thing.
It's checking in with ourselves, Harps, that, we check in with other things. We'll check in and go and get our nails done. We might check in and go and get our eyebrows threaded. But when do we ever write down when we're checking in on our relationship? And one of the things that I've learned from Annie, actually, when she first got married and they were renting in a flat, and I went into their flat to help them move stuff. And, you have, most households have their things to do list of their weekly shopping list or their menu planning board out. And they had their board out, but they had values next to it that they didn't want to forget for the week. So some of their pre-marriage values they had up there, that even if we get really annoyed at each other when we're moving boxes and stuff, remember to be kind to each other, remember to show respect. So actually it was marriage stuff that was always also put as part of their things to do list.
I love that. I think they've had such a lovely foundation with, doing things like that course, that it kind of takes you back to it every time you might go through a rocky patch as well. You kind of, it's deep rooted in your relationship, which is really beautiful. You're aware of it constantly, which is really nice. But I think we spoke the other day about appreciating each other's skill sets. So where Breatham might not want to, he's not really into doing the Hoover. His skill set, his time might be better spent on doing something which requires a skill that I can't actually do, that I don't possess. And it's okay that, I'm not a jack of all trades, and neither is he. He doesn't know how to do all the things that I'm able to do. For example, managing the boys' kind of schedules and their PE kits and their packed lunch boxes and all of that. I mean, he could do it if he really had to, but I think I'm generally the more organized kind of, right, this is what needs to get done. And whereas with him, he's better off, if the boiler packs up at home, he's better off fixing the boiler, because I cannot do that. And I think it's appreciated. Yeah. It's not a point scoring thing, is it? Oh, I'm good at this, so you that's not fair, or you did this, so I've got to do that. And it's respecting each other's strengths and working together, and ultimately remembering that everything you're both doing is for a common purpose. It's for your family and for your home, and it's a joint kind of.
It's the common purpose part. So what you're doing, it's not about, okay, you fix the boiler, and whether it's a man or woman who's good at fixing the boiler, I don't know. There's different skill sets. I know if it was Tara, my youngest daughter, she'd probably be very good at that because she's interested in it. But whoever's, you're not going to measure it and say, that took me 2.5 hours to do that, whereas it only took you 2 hours to do the ironing. Therefore, you're in credit or debit by that much. That is where the point scoring becomes trivial. And then the language that you use comes from a place of bitterness rather than a place of love and gratitude. So you're more likely to say, oh, but you did this, you only did that, and I did this. And ego comes into it as well.
I think, yeah, just appreciating each other and recognizing and valuing, you know, what you both bring to the table is such a massive thing. And it goes a very long way. And it goes back to kindness, doesn't it? Being kind to each other and coming from a place of love and, yeah, just working together. As hard as it is sometimes, let's face it, you know, especially during lockdown, there's been loads of people that have messaged me saying, oh, I'm so flipping fed up, you know, I'm done, like I'm just fed up. And it's like, yeah, I hear you, you know, sometimes I feel like that. We all go through it, but it's working through it and actually taking a step back and thinking, okay, this is actually a pretty difficult situation for everyone. The same way you might be feeling frustrated, your partner might be feeling frustrated with, you know, whatever. So it's recognizing and appreciating, you know, the things that you both bring to the relationship. But Geeta, I wanted to ask you, because there's quite a few people that have messaged me about, you know, in-law relationships. So, you know, I'm just sick of my in-laws, or I don't really, you know, I'm struggling with that whole relationship, or, you know, my husband's really overly close to my mother-in-law, whatever, you know, the general kind of things that commonly come up in Asian families. What would be your advice on, like, from your, not that I'm saying that you've been through that, but what would be your advice from living in a joint family and from being married for so long? What would be your general advice?
It's a difficult one, Harps. And again, I think every family that lives in maybe a 2 or 3 generational space has to come up with their own kind of set of protocol, really. And it depends on their starting point and who's willing to listen. So if, for example, the couple have got married where there hasn't been a choice, they don't know. They're just 2 people who've been put together and they don't know what their shared values are or their common interests and all of that. They don't know how their in-laws are going to respond to that. But I think, again, coming back to, and I know this could sound a bit superficial and non-critical, but it's coming back to that point of kindness. And it's not just the woman's job to be kind, it's both sides. I mean, I know for me, for my husband, if he is kind to my mum and kind to my family or my cousins, that means a lot to me. That shows me, you know what, he really cares about my family just as I give back to his. But I think it's about transparency. I mean, one of the Dadimas that we recently interviewed, it was really nice because we were actually getting a few daughter-in-laws who are messaging us and saying, you know what, Geeta, there's so much bad press about mother-in-law, daughter-in-law relationships, but I do live with my mother-in-law. We don't always get on, but it's just really nice how we've managed to navigate our differences, just as you do as a couple. And I think the other thing to recognise is you're not married to your in-laws, but sadly, in some family situations, it can be like that. You're married as partners, and fundamentally, it comes back to the point you said earlier. Your primary circle has to be you as a couple first, and you two.
I'm fortunate that everyone has that school of thought. I know that many don't, but I think, for me, you know, in the beginning, the thing is, I think if you go in with the approach that, okay, the same way I have arguments with my own mum, I am bound to feel frustrated with my mother-in-law, and she is also bound to feel frustrated with me.
Yes, she is. Yeah.
It's not just, you know, mother-in-laws are bad or whatever. I think it's recognizing that sometimes you might do things that, you know, aren't quite, that might upset them because you're coming from different places. The same way you drive each other, your siblings mad, or your own mum, you know, you have bickering. I have bickering arguments with my own mum. I think the way I approached it was, right, you know, if my mother-in-law, if there was ever an issue, I'd just say, Mum, you know, that thing that you said, it really upset me, and I know that, you know, this is all new to you as well. This is the first time you're a mother-in-law. This is the first time I'm a daughter, well, the only time I'm going to be a daughter-in-law. So it's really important that we share how we're feeling. We talk about it. So I kind of approached it in a way that, you know, you've got to tell me if I'm not doing something quite right, or if I've upset you as well, because I'm not always going to be able to, I'm not always going to know. You know?
Absolutely. And that's what one of the families that we interviewed recently, that's what they said. They said, actually, we do have disagreements, but we talk about them.
Yeah.
And I think anybody who, you know, I'm not, like I said, I'm not a relationship expert, but I think it's having those safe, open, transparent conversations where we can, using kind language, not using aggressive language, because I think that's where things get het up and taken out of context. And it's speaking when you feel calm as well. Sometimes when we speak, when we're in that confrontational situation, words are said and we can't retract them.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that I've definitely learned from my mum, observing my mum, my mother-in-law, and a couple of my sister-in-laws actually, is learning to pause before you speak. It doesn't mean that you haven't got a voice. It doesn't mean that you're oppressed. It just means that you are thinking carefully before you open your mouth, but you're speaking. But you still have to share how you're feeling. Otherwise, you'll feel even more hurt that nobody's listening to me. So I think we have to learn gradually with confidence to be bold and have those conversations, which are going to be uncomfortable. And there's so many uncomfortable conversations going on at the moment with the whole Black Lives Matter. You know, we're not going to change things if we don't have them.
Yeah, it's true. It's putting it out there and kind of hearing each other out as well, and being respectful of. My dad always says to me, he's like, you know, in general, this has been his advice. He's always said, you know, if somebody's got an opinion on something, you don't always have to try and prove that person wrong, because in their eyes, that opinion is right in their world. It's an opinion.
Yeah.
You know, it's not fact. It's an opinion. The same way that your opinion isn't fact. It's an opinion. So don't always have, you know, he's always taught us girls, don't have this mindset where you've got to prove a point. And I think sometimes, you know, people can get lost in trying to make a point. And that can be quite damaging, both with your partner and both with managing other relationships as well.
Yeah. And I think just as you do in a relationship, Harps, it's finding a point of connection. So it's, you know, even if you're from, and I'm actually going to be doing a series on this soon on Dadima's page, that even though my mother-in-law and I have had very different upbringing, different perspectives, and it's when you turn it on its head. And I was thinking the other day, what are the things that I've really learned from living with my mother-in-law and spending quite a lot of time with her? And I think when you start to see things from a positive perspective, I think your thinking, your language, everything becomes more positive, rather than, you know, articulating cruel words or words which are quite cutting and offensive. And hopefully your mother-in-law will think the same about you, and be thinking, I wonder what I've learned from my daughter-in-law. Because whether or not they say it, we're learning through each other. So they will be learning through us, we're learning through them as two generations. You know, it's finding those points of connection. And again, it's kind, but sadly not everybody is like that. And there are women who suffer from horrific situations living in the extended family, but that's another discussion.
No, it's tough.
That's definitely another discussion. But the other thing I just wanted to say before I forget, Harps, is I said like a couple of years ago we did a marriage check-in. That wasn't initiated by me. If anything, I'm the one who said, oh, how useless, really don't need to go. It's not like we're going to split up, so why do we need to go for counselling? But you know, we'd gone through quite a bit with my younger daughter's surgery. So a lot of stuff had happened where we did need to do a check-in. And there was a line that the counsellor said, which was, it will always hit home to me. And she said, look, the two of you have had so much going on, and it's almost like you're standing at two sides of a room, is you need to learn to dance with each other again. And I've never, ever forgotten that line. So if ever I'm feeling angry or stuff is going on, you know, I kind of visualize that scene of a ballroom or something and think, how are we going to learn to dance with each other again, rather than standing at each end of the room?
On opposite sides.
On opposite sides of the room, because you need both of you to dance, don't you?
You both need to be in it, right? unless you want to go. No, that's really useful. It is a good piece of advice, and it's remembering that you're a team and you work together, and there's going to be ups and downs, highs and lows as you ride the trials and tribulations of, life. Even for us, I mean, we're by no means a perfect couple, but we've obviously been through life events that we never ever imagined we'd have to go through when we first got married. I often think about our Sangeet in Goa when we were dancing the night away on the beach. It was just pure bliss. It was amazing, and thinking, oh, our life's going to be a fairy tale. And I had no idea. We couldn't have made this stuff up. Like, I had no idea what we were going to go through. But there's nobody else that I'd rather do it with. And just the way in which
you hit the nail on the head.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's nobody else you'd rather do that with. No,
and he always says it to me. He's like, I know we piss each other off sometimes, Hops, but he's like, there's no one else that I'd rather be doing this with. Like, we are so good together, and it's just pausing sometimes and taking a step back and thinking, we're actually so good. Like, this is so minor what we're bickering about right now. Who cares who takes the bins out? Whatever. I mean, he generally does the bins, but that was just a little example. But it's remembering that bigger picture, and actually, there is nobody else. And when I stop and think about everything that we've been through and the fact that we're still standing, it's massive. Those were all tests of our marriage, and I think I see that. Yeah. We were able to ride that storm and still be standing after and come out stronger. And I think all these life events and all these hurdles that you go through are almost like little tests for your marriage as well. And
there are huge tests. They are huge tests, Harps, and I know you've been through many. And one of the things that sadly, one of my cousins lost her husband very young, at the age of 36. And sometimes, I think definitely over the last 5-6 years, it's really pushed this very basic concept of gratitude to the forefront again, that whilst we can moan, we can shout at each other, we've got someone to do that with. I look at my own mother, who was widowed in her very early 50s. Whatever happened in their relationship, she doesn't have anybody now. And I think it comes back to kindness and gratitude, that we need to be grateful, first of all, if we are in loving relationships, because so many people are not in loving relationships, and these are difficult journeys. I never forget on my dolly, when I got married, very traditional wedding, when a father kind of sees his daughter off, in the wedding car, and my dad said to me, you're about to embark on the most difficult journey of your life. It doesn't matter how qualified you become, how educated you become, this is a very difficult journey.
He wasn't lying.
And he wasn't lying. God bless us. He was a wise man. And it is, because, there's compromise, there's your, gratitude, and there's going to be days where actually you don't want to be grateful for each other. You don't want to show an action of love. You don't want to do all this. But I think it's coming back to, okay, you've got to check in with yourself again and say, hold on, I've been really miserable for a couple of days. Gosh, I'm really bitter, or I'm feeling like this, uncomfortable. Why is it? What is it that's happened? And it's coming back to those fundamental values. And unless we go through them somehow, and I'm not saying everybody has to go on a course or anything like that, but I think it's making time to check in with each other. We do a spring clean of our house every year. Most people do, where they declutter, take stuff to the charity shop. Do we actually make time to say, what, once a year, we're going to do a marriage check-in. We're going to do a spring clean of our relationship and look at what's really worked well this last year. We've had these health issues. We've had all these different issues. How have we overcome them? How has it made us stronger?
I think it's a really good tip to just almost put it in your diary so you don't forget, because it's something, so we take it for granted, don't we? And you just think, oh, it's fine, it's ticking along. But actually taking that time to just sit and talk and reflect is so important. And also, the outlook, looking into the future. We'll often talk about, I'll say, oh, why you seem so frustrated, what's going on? Or they'll say to me, you've been so miserable the last few days. And I think, oh shit, have I? Yeah, actually, you're right, I have. and what is it that's bothering me, and then we'll share it. And I think, okay, you basically need me to do X, Y, Z to help you while, you know, such and such is going on, and vice versa. You know, sometimes it's like, well, with them, I just need you to do this for me right now because I'm struggling a little bit. And I think with men especially, you need to be quite
explicit.
Yeah.
You do. You've got to kind of spell it out more sometimes for some people. And I think coming back to, you know, even talking to you today, Harps, it's been a check-in actually, even doing this live. It's been a check-in to think about myself. And I actually went through my diary over the last year and looked at, well, where have I penciled in time for us? And I know since the lockdown, just because we're in lockdown, we can assume that because we're in the same space, in the same house, that actually it doesn't matter. But actually sometimes we can be even busier, because what we're doing is we're compensating for being at home by busying ourselves. And that's one of the things I said over dinner this evening to Sabash. I said, you know, actually, you know what, we got into a good habit of doing some like weekly check-ins or talking to each other more, and actually we need to revisit that ourselves and go back to it. And even, you know, for us, looking at, you know, could we actually join one of the local Catholic courses on marriage? Because they do have refresher courses, and they're not grounded necessarily just in Catholicism, but they're just basic fundamental values.
Yeah.
You know, values which are common universal values for a good relationship and a healthy relationship.
No, it sounds good. And I think you're right about lockdown. Britam and I have spent no time together as a couple.
Yeah.
You know, the boys are sleeping and we're just kind of busy with, you know, just life. And I think
maybe I need to come over and babysit one day, Harps.
Yeah, I'll take you up on that offer. But, you know, it's just, we're spending time together in a different way. So we are, but it's not, you know, the kind of focused couple time. It's like the family, oh, with them, let's get the garden cleared out. Let's do it together. And it's, so it's not. Yeah,
it's not proper quality time. The other thing I just wanted to mention as well, which I've been guilty of, which I'm really, really being mindful of now, is putting the phone away at certain times because it interrupts with the relationship. So I know if we're watching a movie on a Friday night or something, or on a Saturday if we're going out for a walk, I'll just say, right, I'll leave my phone at home, or my phone's on silent in the other room. And the most important people have our house number. And, you know, if nobody phones for a couple of hours and you don't check your phone, it's not the end of the world.
No, it's
so I think
true.
It's being, I mean, my husband is very, very good. He only checks in on his phone at key times, so he doesn't check his phone very much. He's not on social media, all of that. So he doesn't have those layers of complexity that some of us might have. So I think it's being mindful, because the phone can almost become another person in the relationship as well.
Yeah, it's just so accessible as well, isn't it? And it's just, I agree. I mean, I try, and Arjun is a very good little reminder of, Mummy, can you put your phone away now? And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so terrible that my son is, you know, kind of outing, being mindful of it. And I think that is something that I'm trying to do more of as well, especially on like family movie night and things like that. You know, just put it away and focus and enjoy the time that you've got. But it's been so lovely to speak to you, Geeta, and I know that people are going to find this really, really helpful. You've shared lots of little pearls of wisdom. I'm going to look into some sort of a course. I think that sounds really great.
I'll ask Annie about it.
Even if it's a book that, you know, we could sort of do at home and talk through, I think it's absolutely brilliant. You know, it's so, I think it just adds depth to a relationship, because it's drawing your attention to certain things. It's not that those things aren't there, but it's having an open conversation about those things. So I think it's brilliant.
Well, thank you, Harps. I've learned a lot from you as well, and I learn a lot from, you know, people who are younger than me, people who are older than me, and it's okay to do that. You know, we've got different experiences, but I think if you look at them through the lens of learning, I think we always do learn. It's how you choose, what you choose to take away from that interaction.
I absolutely agree. It's been so lovely, Geeta.
Okay, thank you so much, and thank you to everyone for tuning in as well.
See you later.
Okay, bye everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.